shoo. Bradley Stalder, welcome to the Mind of Mansion program.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be on with you again.
Yeah, this is the pre-show. So that was just a little. I've never done any kind of little flourish with my voice there for the pre-show. I save it for the real intro to the show.
Yes.
Right, but I thought maybe a little extra flourish, like program. I think I'm going to keep that.
I like it.
Workshop it. If it works, you keep it. That's how it works. And Tyler's in the chat. Tyler Knable, our fearless producer, is here with us. And moments ago, Bradley and I were marveling at the ADPs for the Rams backfield. And you may think, well, I think I've pretty much heard all the takes I need from the Podfather on the Rams backfield. I'd rather not go over this again. But this is not a topic that is going to go away. There are all kinds of ways that you can slice, dice, examine this particular situation. We can come in from the side. We can come in from the top. We can put the microscope, and see the layers. And then we can come in from and then we can see how the molecules are arranging themselves. There's all kinds of ways to look at this because it is so informative, in that it is so crazy, right? It is so irrational, and it's been the theme of this whole offseason for me, is that on balance, as a whole, the fantasy football community is getting smarter, and then there's just this one glaring particular unit of a team, the Rams backfield, where everyone has just decided, because when I say everyone, it is the crowd, the wisdom of the crowds. It's everyone is the ADP on Underdog Fantasy. That is everyone, right? And when you look at the ADP on a Kyren Williams, you have no choice but to come to the conclusion that everyone is an idiot. And it's like, how is it that everyone's getting smarter and yet still an idiot? And that's what we've seen. So we were marveling at the ADP differential between Blake Corum and Kyren Williams and how it's changed since the draft for good and for bad and for ugly.
Yeah, we're looking at Kyren Williams before the draft, or like the day after. So I ran the ADP. He was 13th overall the day after the draft. And then I ran it today. He's at 29.5. So really a round and a half drop in the last 2 months, month and a half, 2 months. And that doesn't make sense, Matt, because we got new information. We got Blake Corum added to this backfield as a day 2 running back, one of the best running backs in college football before he had his injury, University of Michigan. And now he's in this Rams backfield. We know what the contingency upside for Blake Corum is, but the pathway for him to overtake Kyren Williams is real, given Kyren's foot injury, but also given the reality that Corum is probably just going to win the job outright over the course of the season. And then you're getting a player who we've seen in this backfield, like this type of running back, win. Like we see Todd Gurley from back in the day. And then we saw what Kyren Williams did, add a player who is a skilled pass catcher, a skilled between the tackles type of guy who has the draft capital. And the news that has been dropping about Blake Corum has been nothing but positive. And he's only increased 11 spots in ADP since the draft. This is Blake Corum going from a round 11 pick to a round 10 pick. Matt, this is extremely, it doesn't make any sense. It's completely irrational, as you mentioned earlier. So we want to be in on Blake Corum, and Corum is my number 2 most drafted running back out of over 100 drafts on Underdog Fantasy so far. The contingency upside is massive, and even if it's not contingency, the value of the Rams backfield is not baked into what Corum can do right now in his ADP.
So let me get this straight. So Kyren Williams has lost more ADP value than Blake Corum, just in terms of like integer value from one number to the next. 15 slots in the last 30 days. 25 slots since the draft. But it's been a gradual. I'm showing on the screen right now. On the screen right now is just the last 30 days. This is just since mid-May. But if you go back from the draft, it's been this steady decline down for Kyren Williams. But there has been no news. The only new information that has come out that we know is that the Rams coaches like Blake Corum, right? But Blake Corum was liked by Jim Harbaugh. Blake Corum was the national championship winning starting running back.
Yes.
Blake Corum has the size and the skill set to be an all-purpose back in the league. Not necessarily a Jonathan Taylor level talent, but whatever the notch below that is, right? And basically what they wanted Cam Akers to be.
Yes.
So it's like, so if in the law of the conservation of average draft position, a term I just made up just this second, okay, then for every 10 slots that Kyren Williams loses, Blake Corum at ADP 130 at the draft would rise 40 spots, 50 spots. It's 4 to 5x. When you're talking about a guy in the double-digit rounds, those draft slots are orders of magnitude less valuable than draft slots at pick 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. But that's not what happened. Kyren has lost more value than Blake Corum has gained. And so who do you think it's going to be in the backfield then? Is it going to be this mystery third running back candidate? No. Of all the running back candidates out there, of all the RB3s, Ronnie Rivers is one of the least interesting RB3s in the NFL. What?
There's no one else, Matt. There's no one else. And to give another perspective, Kyren Williams has dropped since the draft 126% of his previous relative ADP. Blake Corum has only risen 8% of his relative ADP. So I tried to do the math of like, what would it take? You couldn't even get to 100%. Like something's got to give.
Has the Rams backfield suddenly become much less fantasy viable? There are going to be fewer touchdowns scored. Somehow, did the offensive line get decimated by injuries in the offseason workouts by guys tearing pecs while they're bench pressing? That's the only way that would make sense in a rational world, that they're going to have Kyren lose this amount of ADP. And the crazy thing is, these guys should have similar ADPs. These guys should both be going in like the 5th round.
That's about the right spot.
Instead, because it's a totally ambiguous backfield where you have no idea what's going to happen. Because just because a guy was super productive last year in a partial season stretch doesn't mean that he's going to be, an RB1 this year. Like, how many years have we seen a great partial season from a particular player, whether it be like every Broncos running back for a 10-year stretch, or every other sort of stretch zone scheme running back that's come along? Does anyone think Raheem Mostert's going to be a top 10 running back this year? Right? No. Right? Of course not. But somehow in this particular scenario, everybody lost their minds. Everybody lost their minds. In a vacuum, Blake Corum is leaps and bounds a better running back. He's much bigger. He's a much better pass blocker. It's unknown whether he's a better pass catcher in the NFL. With especially as a receiver in the NFL, you have to let the chips fall and let these guys get actual playing time. before you can see, because Kyren Williams was a reception magnet at Notre Dame, but he's been an average pass catcher this year in terms of efficiency in the NFL over the last couple of years. Blake Corum caught plenty of passes at Michigan. We don't know what he's going to be in the NFL. We'll see. I know that Blake Corum is going to be a better between the tackles runner. There's no way that Kyren Williams is ever going to be good at that. He's not explosive, and he doesn't have the size to be that guy. So there's all these areas where we know Blake Corum's better, or it's unknown who's better. It is the height of bizarro world. Okay, so on average, the decisions fantasy gamers were making 10 years ago were much worse. And yet the biggest possible mistakes that were being made 10 years ago, there are equivalent mistakes still being made today.
Yes.
Right, the Justin Forsett draft pick, taking Justin Forsett in the 3rd round, 4th round, is the equivalent of where Kyren Williams is going now. But a week after the draft, he was still going in the 2nd round, which is, we have the information, right? All that's left is like the most predictable coach speak ever, which is that Rams coaches like Blake Corum. Right? And so what we should have seen, it should have been like a stock chart where, you know how what happens is there'll be an earnings call after hours, right? And you'll see the stock chart after hours, boom, on a single day, it'll be a direct vertical line down or a direct vertical line up, and then it'll flatten again. Like, that's how efficient markets work. The information comes in, it gets processed in the matter of seconds. There's high-speed trading that happens, and then boom, the correction happens in less than a day, and everybody moves on with the new valuation, and that's what it is until the next earnings call or the next big, market shift of, interest rates have gone up or whatever, right? Great, cool, whatever. This didn't happen. Let's go one more time. We have to look at this chart on Kyren Williams. It's gradual. It's every day people come to Jesus a little bit more and a little bit more. That is the height of an irrational market where it takes months for the reality to arrive. It's like going from, we have the internet with all these players, right? All these players, the information's coming in through the internet. Apps on our phone, we're getting real-time alerts. The draft happens, right? The draft happened. It happened. We were there. You were at the draft in Detroit.
Yeah.
And then so he announces the picks, right? The pick gets announced as Blake Corum. It happens instantly. We all get an alert on our phone. Okay, the Rams have selected Blake Corum. And then within 5-10 minutes, everyone updates their models and everything corrects. And now Kyren Williams and Blake Corum are both going in the 5th round. That's the efficient marketplace. But somehow there was this glaring exception where no one believed it and everyone just said, no, we have conviction in this one guy who's not good. It's, of all the players, at least have conviction. Like, there's players like Kenneth Walker, Rashad White, who are really good running backs, who have won awards, like as the best college running back, or have had great achievements in the NFL, right? With total yards and usage. There's all these achievements that these running backs can achieve, that they can post, where it's impressive, where it's like they're in rare company. But no, that's not the guy where all the conviction and all the irrationality was concentrated in. It was Kyren Williams. What a joke. This chart is embarrassing. I'm embarrassed on behalf. Like, when let's say that I'm the representative, right? Let's say that there's other planets, and on those other planets, they have games like fantasy football, right? And let's say that there's this big convention, and then I get to take a spaceship, and I get to brag about the fantasy football marketplace, the efficiency, how smart and savvy, and how we're going to impress the universe with our understanding of sports and predicting sports outcomes. And man, the people on planet T25685, they're going to look at fantasy football and be like, wow, these guys are far ahead. better not talk about Kyren Williams. No, it's like we're going to be doing a whole presentation for the aliens, and we're going to just casually delete the slide with the Rams backfield because they can't know that we're this dumb.
Well, that's why it's such an auto smash in the 10th round, Matt. Such an auto smash. And there are so many, even just contingency upside running backs that are going ahead of Corum, and it makes no sense. Not just in his own backfield lunacy, but also like the likes of Devin Singletary are going ahead of Blake Corum, just to give a name, like a full round ahead. Not even like, oh, is it Singletary or Corum? No, it's clearly Blake Corum, both of what he could do to win the job, but also if Kyren Williams goes down with an injury, which he's already dealing with injuries, and he's dealt with injuries his whole NFL career because he's not built to hold up over the course of a season. His player profiler comp, Kyren Williams' player profiler comp is Theo Riddick, like a solid pass catcher out of the backfield. And it works well with the Matt Stafford correlate. Like, he can catch passes out of the backfield, not super efficient, but he's an NFL caliber player, but not one that's going to shake, rattle, and roll an NFL offense.
Blake it could have happened when Stafford was on the Lions. It could have happened that all the other Lions running backs got hurt, or they traded another one, whatever they traded. And, Joik Bell or whatever.
Amir Abdullah didn't pan out.
Yeah,
so.
they traded Amir Abdullah to the Vikings. I think Amir Abdullah was a Viking at one point. And so Amir Abdullah goes to the Vikings. Joik Bell goes down, whatever. I'm just picking, nondescript, irrelevant running backs. And then all of a sudden it's Theo Riddick's job. And then, of course, he's very quick.
PPR relevant player.
And he's a very good player. I mean, Chris Thompson, all these guys, they've had RB1. Chris Thompson was an RB1 in fantasy, right? These guys are top 12 running back seasons. They have them on their resumes. It's happened. It's happened. But if you put Theo Riddick, you put Chris Thompson in one of those roles after 8 weeks, they're going to get hurt. There's going to be some foot injury. There's going to be a shoulder injury, and they're going to be out for the year. That's what's going to happen every time. It's like, these are movies I don't need to watch. Like, my daughter's like, oh, let's watch this movie. And I'm like, I've seen that movie. I get that you're just finding out about it, but I've seen it already. I don't need to watch it with you unless it's really good. Then, maybe we'll watch. If it's like The Other Guys, that's probably the most underrated movie, which I think The Other Guys is kid friendly. We did look up Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and that was another one where I was like, I've seen that, and it's a rom-com technically, so I'm here. I'm not going to watch Definitely Maybe with you, but I might watch Forgetting Sarah Marshall, and then I read the reviews on Sarah Marshall, and it's like, oh, anytime you have like simulated masturbation and oral sex, you're like, okay, we're not watching that. All right, because I don't remember that movie. No. I'm like, that's weird. I don't remember that movie being R. Or when you see the R rating, you're like, what? I don't remember that. I think that was mostly just swearing or something. I don't remember why it was R. And then you read the reviews where they actually call out the scenes and what they're talking about, and you're like, oh yeah, no, we're not watching this. I don't need this awkwardness in my life. I don't need to explain this shit to you. That's why you have health class. Thank you very much. So, I don't remember what we were talking about. Oh, Theo Riddick. Yes. So anyway, we're going to be very careful with our presentation to the Federation of Planets. Fantasy football would be one of the most impressive things. The fantasy football community, the fantasy football ecosystem, I think one of the most efficient places that you could, and where stats and game theory, all these things are used at a high level. That'd be very impressive to alien civilizations, especially because we've done it around sports, something that's so frivolous. They would find that hilarious, how much time we spend. We could talk about how much time the average fantasy gamer spends at work playing fit, and they would be fascinated by that. They'd be like, that's so crazy. And I'd be like, here's the thing, though. Like, they're better at this than their job. And they're like, whoa, that's nuts. So I would love to have that conversation with the aliens and then just not talk about the Rams backfield at all, because that would be very painful.
It might undermine, our
it would undermine our
here.
whole case.
Yes.
As a civilization, as a people. What about Brandon Aiyuk? Brandon Aiyuk is interesting. There's a lot of questions in the chat. I always like to go to the chat just to make sure that we're satiating the masses for what they want to talk about. There's a lot. What is your view on the Brandon Aiyuk drama?
Yeah, the drama has been continuing since the draft, right? We remember in Pinckney, Michigan, where there were rumblings about San Francisco 49ers going to move on from Aiyuk. And then there was, we're going to move on from Debo. And then it was Aiyuk. So something had to give. And then during the draft, they took Ricky Pearsall in the first round and Jacob Cowing in the fourth round, 2 speed wide receivers. And he didn't get traded. But now today, I don't know if you saw the video yet, Matt, but just today, a video dropped of Brandon Aiyuk saying that the 49ers don't want him, that they've told him that they don't want him. So the question is there anything actionable, or is there any pathway landing spot where he could be exploding? Because if he remains on the 49ers, he is a mispriced player in Underdog and the best ball streets. He's getting mid-second round draft capital, which is wild, given McCaffrey and Debo and Kittle all in this ecosystem, plus Ricky Pearsall, who I'm not very high on, overall, but that's a completely separate talking point. If Aiyuk lands on an average team, great, fantastic, wonderful. I think he could probably pay off mid-second round, but there's also been some ties to bad landing spots. Like if he goes to Pittsburgh, he could still maintain a 25% target share, but he needs to fall to round 4, right? He needs to fall significantly to be a decent player. So when it comes to this, I think Aiyuk is mispriced for the most likely outcomes for where he's probably going to be, either San Francisco, maybe it's Pittsburgh. The bad offenses that want a wide receiver that will pay him the $28+ million that he wants. According to reports, he turned down $26.5 million, which is wild. So, right.
Bro. He's going mid-second round on Underdog. Bro. What? He is the Kyren Williams of wide receivers. This information was revealed to us in the draft. They drafted Ricky Pearsall. And his ADP's only gone up. It's only gone up. It's the craziest thing. And then there's this famous cliche in fantasy football, right? Famous. I think I made it famous by constantly talking about it in the context of my cliche alert.
Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert! Cliche alert!
Right? And it's too many mouths to feed.
Yep.
Right. And so again, this is where as an overall industry, fantasy football getting better. There's less people talking about how many mouths there are to feed, because everybody knows now that there's all this volatility that happens throughout the year and also in the off season, guys getting injured, guys getting traded, things just shaking themselves out. And don't worry as much, just bet on the great offenses and generally, unless it's the later rounds, fade those bad offenses. These are some basic principles everyone's kind of sort of starting to really internalize. Great. Except here. There's Kittle. There's McCaffrey. There's, this guy named Debo. There's the fancy receiver they drafted at the 1-2 turn in the NFL draft. And yet Aiyuk has an ADP that is completely misaligned with his entire history of production in the league. He's 26 years old, right? He's never been a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. He was a mid-level wide receiver 2 last year on the strength of an unsustainable 18 yards per reception. You know, the targets were actually down from the previous year. The receptions were down from the previous year. And the previous year, he had 13.4 fantasy points per game. And he was being drafted in the 4th round. That's where he belongs. That's where he's belonged all along. That's where you would have thought that in an efficient market where, okay, they draft Ricky Pearsall, there's all these rumors about a trade. Okay, boom, it's a straight vertical line down from the 2nd round to the 4th round. It flattens back out. And here we are. Efficiency. Beautiful. I can share that with the aliens. They'll be impressed. Right? Instead, I'm looking at something where he's going up. And it doesn't make any sense. He's a great player. But we're talking about the 2nd round, man. We're talking about the 2nd round. An offense that you could, what's the similar offense? Who came from this Shanahan coaching tree? Mike McDaniel. Right? Mike McDaniel. Right. There's a player who is basically very similar in their play style to Brandon Aiyuk, right? And he's going after Brandon Aiyuk on Underdog right now. His name's Jaylen Waddle.
Yes.
And Jaylen Waddle is dealing with far fewer mouths that must be fed. Do you think Devon A-Chain is the same kind of receiver out of the backfield? Do they have a Kittle there in Miami? What am I missing? Someone explain this to me. Waddle versus Aiyuk. Like, if we were blindfolded in a hole somewhere, like Pulp Fiction or Silence of the Lambs, and the only way we could get out of that hole would be to guess who has a higher ADP, Waddle versus Aiyuk, you and I would be either dead or, you know, having sex with someone with a mask on that we don't know. Because we would have said Waddle, and we would have been wrong.
I mean, my projections have Waddle ahead of Brandon Aiyuk.
Of course you do! Because you're a normal person who understands how fantasy works. What are we talking about? Every year, Waddle puts up Aiyuk 2023 numbers. And yet, we're projecting Aiyuk to better those numbers this year and projecting Waddle, though he's done it for 3 years in a row, to just have the same numbers. It's like, wait, Waddle is someone you can set your watch by. The guy's just putting up 15 fantasy points per game. Some years it's on yak. Some years it's with air yards. It doesn't matter. He's going to do it. Right? 1 year he had 1,400 air yards. Another year he led the league in yak per target. And he's 25 years old. He's younger. And he has less target competition.
The contingency upside is so much higher with Jaylen Waddle. If the number one
insane.
receiver goes down, if Tyreek goes down, Waddle becomes top 5, top 10 wide receiver. Easy, smash.
Right.
If Debo goes down, does Aiyuk jump that high? No. If Kittle goes down, does Aiyuk jump that high? No. So even on their face, prima facie, on their face, it's Jaylen Waddle. And then contingency upside, it's still Jaylen Waddle.
Right. So it's sort of like, let's say you were playing poker, right? Let's put it in poker terms. Let's say we're at a big table. We're playing Texas Hold'em. There's 8 people at the table, right? I have, let's say, king, queen suited. Okay? King, queen suited. That's Jaylen Waddle. Okay? You have a pair of 7s. Okay? That's Brandon Aiyuk. Heads up, right? Heads up. You know, this is kind of a push, right? It could break either way. Before the flop, you're a favorite with your 7s, and then, you know, a lot of things can break my way, right? On a big table, the idea that I could hit a flush, or I could hit a straight, or I could even hit a straight flush and take everybody's money, that doesn't exist. It does exist, but the probability is much lower for you to do that with a goddamn pair of 7s. Okay,
For
that's
reference,
why that's a better hand, right? You want king queen suited, especially the more people are sitting at the table, especially when you're going into an underdog tournament that's $15 million prize pool, right? That's where you want a Jaylen Waddle. That's where you got to start to iterate over the contingent upside. That's where you care so much about contingent upside. What if something happens to Tyreek Hill? As every receiver, Justin Jefferson missed games last year. Every receiver is going to have seasons, whether it be Randy Moss, you name the receiver. Pretty much every receiver but Jerry Rice in their history has had seasons where they lost 10 games to some problem. But whatever it is, suspension, injury, whatever it is. So that's, if that happens, Waddle is a top 10 receiver, if not top 5. And like you said, Debo goes down. Okay. So, if anything, that's more like everyone with Pearsall is really happy about that. No one should be happy about an injury, but the Pearsall people are like, oh man, this is really gonna be a boon for Pearsall. And less so with Kittle, Aiyuk, though it's good for everybody. It's the law of the conservation of targets says everyone's gonna get a few more targets, but it's not gonna be like Waddle being by himself in a passing game. I mean, pinch me.
Yeah, we've seen Waddle get into the escalators of target shares his rookie year. He was 28+% target share. He's been more in that 22, 23, 24% since Tyreek came, but it's within the range of outcomes that he just gets hyper targeted in this McDaniel offense by Tua. We've seen it before. So I have 5 times the exposure on Underdog to Waddle versus Aiyuk. 5x is just massive. Just the difference of what Waddle can bring versus what Brandon Aiyuk will.
You're so good at this. Let me bring you in. We'll do the proper introduction. I don't know if you can hear that. We basically have a little bit of a introduction riff. I don't know what you call it. It's a little ditty. Like, this is a little piano ditty. This is a little synth ditty. I think that's what it is. This is a synth ditty. A little synth ditty that they used to play for the team I like to call the Chicago Bulls. Little player I like to call Michael Jordan. Welcome to the Mind of Mansion program, the host of the Stack Hunters program, and the fearless leader of the Player Profiler News Desk. That's right. Here with me today, my good friend, and with the top analysts at Player Profiler, it is Stalder! Talk to me.
Thanks, Matt. Happy to be on Mind of Mansion yet again. It's always great chopping it up. And good seeing you since the NFL draft back at the end of April. That was a lot of fun tagging with you and the rest of the team covering the draft.
And now you've been hosting the Stack Hunters program. Talk to us about Stack Hunters.
Stack Hunters is a best ball focused podcast that has been going on for about a year on the Roto Underworld Network. Occurs Thursdays, 8 p.m. Eastern, and recently have brought on co-host, regularly cycling through Dan Williamson, added to the co-hosting duties of Stack Hunters. And we bring on some guests to talk best ball. We talk exposures. We do live drafts. We talk strategies. So this week on Thursday, Dan and I are going to debut our 10 commandments of best ball drafting. So we're going to give you those. The following week, we've got a guest from Fantasy Pros, Sam Hoppen, who's going to be doing a data analysis of some of the biggest stacks and stacks to target based on ADPs, and maybe some contingency pivots on stacks. So he has a great visual as well. Sam does. We're very excited to have him. We've had Herzig on the podcast. We've had Leone on the podcast. Billy Muzio recently joining as well. So we've had some great guests. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, Stack Hunters.
Player Profiler YouTube channel. There's also the Stack Hunters podcast. You can search any podcatcher, just search for Stack Hunters. And that's our signature best ball program. And I also mentioned that you are the head of the news desk. So if anyone wants to check out Bradley's work and his team, you can go to playerprofiler.com/news, playerprofiler.com/news. I am, visiting that page most days. I have it bookmarked, and there it is. 5 hours ago, Brandon Aiyuk circling back on a Monday for a new contract. And if you are listening to the podcast, in the outtakes, we get into it, talking about the irrationality of Brandon Aiyuk's ADP. Brandon Aiyuk is the Kyren Williams of wide receivers. Kyren Williams and Brandon Aiyuk have the craziest ADPs that I'm embarrassed by. Like, the industry has embarrassed me, officially embarrassed me. I have a hard time talking about fantasy football with my non-fantasy football friends because I don't want to talk about the Brandon Aiyuk ADP. I don't want to talk about the Kyren Williams ADP because I'm worried, because those people are just common sense people. They're not big fantasy gamers, but they're just common sense people. And so I'm worried that they would think that we're all idiots by, if I were to even talk about where people are drafting Aiyuk, where people are drafting Kyren Williams on Underdog. It makes no sense. It makes us all look bad, but it's true, because if Brandon Aiyuk stays in San Francisco, then he's facing a target squeeze. If he leaves San Francisco, then he might end up on a bad offense that could never justify a second-round ADP. Or he might end up on another offense with similar target competition. There's all this uncertainty with where he might go. There's all this preseason volatility around Brandon Aiyuk, and yet he's being drafted at his absolute max best-case outcome. Given all this uncertainty, that is irrational. Kyren Williams was being drafted at his max outcome for weeks after the draft. It was revealed that there's no way he's going to be able to achieve that because Blake Corum has arrived, and yet it's embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. What do you think is more embarrassing, the Brandon Aiyuk ADP or the Kyren Williams ADP?
Embarrassing for fantasy football in general.
Yes, the fantasy football industry, the community, whatever you want to call
it.
The
Kyren Williams is so egregious. It's so
egregious. It's like I said, it makes me embarrassed to say that I'm even affiliated with fantasy football. Like, I want to make something. I used to love it. I used to love telling people. Like, I'd be at a bat mitzvah, and I'd be talking to some dad, someone that friends with my daughter, and I'm like, I'm meeting him for the first time, be like, oh, I do fantasy football. They're like, oh wow, let me tell you. Now I don't say anything. I don't say it. I have to make up a lie. I say I run a sandwich shop, right? That I specialize in lobster rolls, right? That I have a lobster roll pop-up shop. Like, that's the lie I created this whole elaborate lie that I have a lobster roll pop-up shop down the street, even though they're going to, at an address that doesn't exist. These people are circling. They're putting it in Google Maps. They can't find it. Well, that's because I'm so embarrassed by not hundreds, thousands of idiots drafting Brandon Aiyuk in the second round and Kyren Williams in the second round until recently.
Yeah, the Brandon Aiyuk one, though, is a silent killer. Like, that's one that people are drafting him thinking that he's safe, and he's not. That's the scary part, is Brandon Aiyuk. Okay, so one of the parts of projections for me, not only is like average projections important, but also what are the ranges of outcomes for a player, right? And Brandon Aiyuk, one of the parts is not just averages, but also standard deviation. So how much does his average deviate from? And so Aiyuk's standard deviation last year is in the same range as like a Jahan Dotson, a Quentin Johnston. It didn't deviate very much. So you were not getting the spike weeks that you wanted to see in terms of like big breakout games. And it's because of the target competition. Nothing happened. If in fact, the situation got worse for Brandon Aiyuk over the summer, like what are we doing?
I don't know. Brandon Aiyuk has never been drafted in the second round, not even close. And yet he's being selected ahead of Jaylen Waddle, who has been basically performing at Brandon Ayuk's best case outcome for 3 straight years. Doesn't make any sense. And what I love about the news desk and your team is you guys are not afraid to give a fantasy take. Like when I read this Brandon Aiyuk news blurb, it's 4 paragraphs, and the big paragraph at the end is all about, you know, why is he being drafted in the second round and whether or not that's value or not, and then where he's going in Dynasty. So it's like, hey, here's some actionable Dynasty information. Here's some actionable seasonal league and best ball information, and here's our spin on it. It's not just, oh, here's what we read in The Athletic, and, you know, it may or may not, like, you know, equate to an actionable fantasy football maneuver. No, if we're going to post a news item, there's going to be some actionable fantasy football ramifications. Even Trevor Lawrence's new contract, there are ramifications for Dynasty with Trevor Lawrence getting a new contract. Yes, everybody knows, right? That's not news. Okay, it's everywhere. Trevor Lawrence got a new contract, but we actually are the place that actually our news feed actually has what Dynasty spin that others wouldn't. So that's the difference. That's what I love
Dynasty,
about it. And you and your team are doing a great job.
All of it together. Shout out to Jeremiah Retzlaff for getting that news item out quickly today too, because that's clutch in terms of getting the spin out. Jeremiah is getting a show along with Mike Lindberg on the Player Profiler News YouTube channel. We have a separate YouTube channel for these news items, the videos that are getting posted. Player Profiler today. The team has been crushing it both with the blurbs and the videos. So make sure you guys are also subscribing to Player Profiler News YouTube channel.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You're good at this, man. It's almost like you host your own show called Stack Hunters. It's almost like that. And you're in Michigan, and Underdog recently went live in Michigan at long last. Thank you, Michigan, for finally processing their license. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Right? I mean, I know you weren't you driving to Ohio to do drafts?
Ohio, Indiana, anytime it was Illinois, anywhere close by to get the Underdog drafts in, Matt.
You are improving Bradley Stalder's living standards by he's spending less time in the car, more time with his family. He has a huge family. Yeah. Super proud of you, man. You are helping the human race move forward, and I guarantee there's some fantasy gamers, future fantasy gamers in that family. Now, think back to recent seasons. Give us a couple lessons learned that you can share with the audience. You're a volume drafter, best ball in particular. Talk to us about, moves that you wouldn't make that you made in the past.
Yeah, I'll give 2 of them. One is that in previous seasons, I was overvaluing small ADP values and not stacking. And instead saying, you know what, I'm going to get 3 spots, 4 spots, 5 spots of ADP value, and I'll forego a stack. And right now, I've shifted that because my teams have not been as consolidated. And I wanted to consolidate more. And I saw how lack of stacking, when the decision I was making was not as impactful. Like, to get a player 3 spots after ADP or 4 spots after ADP, not a big deal. And I was overvaluing that as a younger drafter. But now I'll forego that to ensure that I get at least someone in proximity. And my line of demarcation, Matt, is typically 12 spots of ADP. If it's 12 or more spots, that's where I will say, you know what, I'll forego the stack. I will take the big value because as there's been data to suggest that more than 12 spots from rounds like 4 to to 4 to 14, about that range. If you're getting more than 12 spots or 12 spots of ADP value, that's where you are making yourself a unique team. That's where you're getting an advantage over the field. But if you are foregoing a stack with only a couple spots of ADP value, then you're trading off a supercharge and essentially lowering one lever so you can lift one lever just a little higher. And that's not going to be as much of a difference maker. So I want to supercharge my teams, and I don't want to be distracted by just the small little ADP values that might come to me in these volume drafts.
Especially when there are players that are going full rounds above or below where they should be going. There's going to be plenty of value, even value in these stacks. So you don't have to grab every value that comes along. There's plenty of value that and we do have a comment. It says the more they look at it, Aiyuk could end up on the Chargers. And I agree. Aiyuk could end up on the Chargers. In a perfect world, if I were the master, the puppet master of the NFL, I would put Aiyuk. I would airdrop him on the Chargers today, this moment. I would do it. It would be great. It would be great for the league. It would be great for everybody. And then Aiyuk would rightfully be getting drafted in the mid-second round, right? But he's being drafted. The point is, he's being drafted as if he's on the Chargers, and he's not a Charger, and odds are he's not going to be. That's the whole point.
That's the whole point. Avoid Brandon Aiyuk until we get more information.
It's literally the whole ball game, the whole point. Let's talk about rookies. We were in Detroit together covering the draft. Now that we've had a couple months play out, what are the 3 rookies you like best right now in terms of their ADP, their value at cost?
Matt, we've already hammered Blake Corum, but I just want to put a number out there. I've selected Blake Corum in 16.5% of my draft so far, and I feel too low. Like, that's too low.
Yeah. Well, considering he should be like a 5th, 6th round pick, right? He shouldn't be going after pick 70 in any format. So, I mean, because the upside in that offense is big. That offense is going to have to score and score and score and score and score and score. They're not going to be able to stop anybody. No. Their whole defense has been completely hollowed out. Now they have to play the Cardinals twice, the 49ers twice, the Seahawks twice.
And those divisions, I mean, you're going to have to play catch up, and it's going to be Blake Corum. It's going to be, Kyren Williams isn't going to go
catching passes. Blake Corum. Blake Corum is going to take. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Blake Corum's going to catch a screen pass on the 18-yard line, and he's going to break a tackle, break that tackle, go in for a touchdown. Why? Because they're going to be going up and down the field, right? They're going to be going against a prevent defense, and they're going to be letting Blake Corum catch these screen passes, and then Blake Corum just has to break one tackle.
Yes.
That's how it's going to happen. Just because you think a team is going to be facing a lot of garbage time doesn't mean you just want the passing game of that offense. You just want to chase all those touchdowns.
Right. The next one is Jonathan Brooks, also mispriced. He's going past ADP 90. And if it was 4th round Brooks, 5th round Brooks, I get it. But it's just the price, Matt. Like this is the pathway for a really athletic running back on a team that needs players to be good. And this could be Rachaad White 2.0 in the Dave Canales offense, where in the second half of the season, fine, we'll slow the roll for the first half, but we're playing on Underdog Fantasy where the playoffs are weeks 15, 16, 17. Jonathan Brooks catching passes out of the backfield between the tackles in the playoffs.
Yes.
This is a player that, he is a perfect number 3 running back on your best ball teams because you don't need him to be smashing right away for you. He is a 0 RB candidate. We've seen those types of running backs come back from injury, the ACL, like the Todd Gurley's, the Breece Halls in the previous years, where they've got the good draft capital, the athleticism, the pedigree. And it's just an easy smash at between 88 and 93, typically Jonathan Brooks. And you're not investing that much of a draft capital in him. He has a pathway to be a top 12 running back in points per game year one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you could go to a 0 RB. Even in best ball, you could go 0 RB and just only draft rookies and second-year running backs.
Oh.
Yeah, if it's just
delicious.
Kendre Miller, Roshan Johnson,
Yes.
Trey Benson, Jonathan Brooks, and
Trey
Blake
Benson
Corum.
also up there. Yes.
Yes,
Trey Benson.
that's the thing. We've never had this situation where you could have all the day one and day two running backs. You can draft them all, right?
Yes.
They're all going in different rounds. You can get them all. You can collect them all. Plus, you can get a bunch of guys that were drafted on day two, early day three last year that just didn't break out, that have great profiles. And that is my favorite way to construct a 0 RB roster. If you go 0 RB this year, I say you go all the way. You wait it out, like you sweat it out. You're in the sauna. You're in the running back sauna. You're like, I can't do another 5 minutes. I can't let another couple rounds go by. You're like, just keep waiting. Jonathan Brooks, my first running back, and then you do it, and then all of a sudden you can get Corum, and then and suddenly you look up and you got a nice little core of running backs that it's very easy, especially in a large field tournament. You can easily see all these guys ending up as workhorses.
0 RB or hero RB are, I would say, 80% of how I'm drafting my teams. It's very rare do I have a robust running back draft team. I mean,
no,
very
you can't.
rare.
You can't. The guy that really tempts me is Rachaad White. So if I'm going to be drafting Breece Hall,
but even White is mispriced, Matt. White
I know
is
that's the
massively
thing.
mispriced.
He's a massive value. But if I'm going to draft Breece Hall, I'm going to draft because I want teams with Breece Hall and I want teams with Bijan.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So when Rachaad White slips into the 5th round, that is the great challenge. And this is what you're talking about. This is exactly, if you want to actually have, hey, what's a tangible example of what his strategy would entail? It would be you draft Bijan, and then you're staring at Rachaad White in the 5th round, and you can't push the button. You cannot do it. You have to stack. You have to stack. You have to do it. You just have to do it. Maybe it's you go in a quarter. You're like, I can't believe I'm drafting a quarterback. I can't in best ball over Rachaad White. I can't believe I'm doing this. But it's like if it means getting a super stack, if it means executing on a stack, you have to look that ADP value in the eye and let it go. Why?
Yes.
Because you've got other running backs later that are rounds mispriced.
Yes, absolutely. Those are, I mean, Rachaad White is going 61st overall on Underdog.
Joke.
We're talking round 6, beginning of round 6.
Joke.
Joe Mixon's going after that. Like, those are players that it's so hard to not click because they offer such tremendous value. So you've gone a quarterback, you've gone your elite quarterback, you hit up at least 3 wide receivers, maybe you hit one of the elite tight ends, and then you start with like a Rachaad White, Joe Mixon, boom. Or even you push it, like maybe you miss out on those guys. I'm really excited about a lot of the prospects of just tapping in round 7, 8, 9, 10. These running backs, just go 4 straight running backs after you've gone your 4 wide receivers, your elite tight end, and your elite quarterback.
So when I say that I love Bijan and I love Breece Hall this year, and if you want to do a hero RB, then those would be the 2 guys to build around typically. Of course, some McCaffrey when you can get him. But all I'm saying about those running backs is you just want to be even with the field on those running backs. You just want to get your 6 to 9% of those
I mostly
guys.
put a blindfold on, when it comes to first round players. It's pretty even across the board. I think there's only one player that I'm a little lower on the first round relative to.
We'll talk about that
average.
later. Don't say that. I have a question later about that.
Okay,
we'll get to that.
But it's mostly pretty flat, Matt.
No, we have a particular question about that, which we will get to. So that's our big tease for the show. But yes, when I say, oh, I love Hero RB this year, what I mean is, unlike last year, I'm actually fine drafting running backs in the first round. Instead of being all super underweight on all running backs in the first round like we were last year, this year's different. This year, I'm fine being even weight. But don't be overweight on any early round running backs. Do not do that. Do not. None of them. None. You should have anyone that has 10% of any early round running back, that's a mistake. That is a mistake because you have Rachaad White. You've also got Kenneth Walker, right?
Yes.
Kenneth Walker is going at slot 66.
He's going after White and Mixon, yeah.
Yes, you have Walker, White, Mixon. Those are your dead zone backs that you can draft. Those are the three best dead zone backs because, one is like this, splash play specialist in Kenneth Walker. One is like on potentially the best offense in Joe Mixon. The other guy has one of the best all-purpose skill sets in the league and maybe the most mispriced running back. Depends how you want to think of it. Like Rachaad White should at least be a third-round pick, and he's going in the 6th round. And then you have, Blake Corum, who is a 10th round pick, 11th round pick, should be going in the 6th round. So, that's about I think Rachaad White even is slightly better value than even Blake Corum. But that's how it shakes out. So you either get baseline percentage shares of your Bijans and your Breece Halls, ignore running back after that. Then once the 5th round rolls around, then you can start to do your shopping in the dead zone for the game breaking running backs that are available in the dead zone. And then there's also all those 0 RB teams where you're actually not drafting a running back until the end of the dead zone. Like a Jonathan Brooks. Those are fun, man. Those are fun where you could show your casual fantasy gamer friends and they don't understand it. They think it's a bad team. And the rest of us know those teams are so motherfucking
supercharged.
Dangerous. They're so, especially in a big field tournament, man. The funny thing is, the only scenario where you would actually go robust RB would be like a best ball mania, where you could draft, 3 running backs in your first 5 picks and then just go hyper fragile, robust RB. I know they're too. It's so. I hate conflicting terminologies in fantasy football. You know how much I hate like positive regression. I hate it so much. But in this case, I don't have any other way to explain what I'm talking about. Fragile, robust RB, where it's like you pile into running back in the first few rounds and then you ignore it for the rest. That is, you need to have, I don't know, if you're going to max center.
That's a major cojones.
Yeah, if you're going to max center best ball mania, you got to have some of those teams. You got to have at least 5 of those teams in your overall portfolio, if not more. Then you've got to have probably at least twice the number of extreme 0 RB teams, where Jonathan Brooks is your first running back, or Trey Benson is your first running back off the board.
Ramondre Stevenson is a target there. Real bounce back candidate, I think, for New England.
Well, the only thing with Trey Benson is the reason why I like him in best ball, or the thing with Ramondre Stevenson is because there are outcomes where Drake May is good. That's where it's not likely.
Well, Ramondre 2 years ago when he was the RB7 in points per game, the Patriots were 26th in overall offense. So I think
can I just correct you on this?
Okay.
You generally do not want to chase running backs on bad teams. Okay?
It's true.
Of course, it's possible. We're saying it's possible that Jonathan Brooks, who's going to be in a bad team, could just soak up all the targets and break off long runs and be the guy that scores all the touchdowns inside the 20. Adam Thielen steps out at the 1 yard line. That it ends up how it shakes out as it's all Jonathan Brooks. That's very possible.
Right.
Just like that, we saw that with Ramondre Stevenson. Very unlikely though. So what you're really hoping for in terms of the justification for going Ramondre Stevenson is not that he's that rare running back because he's not Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks is at a whole other level of talent. Jonathan Brooks can get it done on a bad team, unlike Ramondre. Things are going to have to go much luckier for Ramondre Stevenson on a bad team, which would be very unlikely. The way you could sell yourself on Ramondre Stevenson, and I have, is that if Drake May exceeds expectations and this overall offense, the receivers exceed expectations, suddenly this offense is not a bottom 3 offense, which most people predict it to be. Every year, there is 1 or 2 rookie quarterbacks that exceed expectations. Why can't that be Drake May? And if Drake May is out here balling, then Ramondre Stevenson is going to be an incredible value.
And we saw that with Houston last year. There was a lot of people who were projecting Houston to be very, very bad with a rookie quarterback, new head coach, Nico Collins, who hadn't broken out, Tank Dell, who's a day 2 wide receiver, blah, blah, blah. And we see a similar pathway for like the Patriots could be the Houston Texans of 2023.
It's harder to see that. It's harder to see that this year for sure. But I mean, they do have some similar players like Dalton Schultz and Hunter Henry. I dare you to tell them apart.
Jalen Polk, Tank Dell.
Jalen Polk actually has better draft capital, right? Jalen Polk. See, now we're getting into Kendrick Bourne is Nico Collins. Things start falling apart. Okay, but hey, right? Hey, Ramondre is certainly better than the running backs they had.
Yes.
Right? So it's not the craziest thing, man. It's not the craziest thing. You look down the board, though. Okay, let's say we are going 0 RB. Let's say we've started with a Jonathan Brooks and a Blake Corum. You're really going to be shopping in the dented can aisle.
Yes.
Who are these guys at the end of a best ball draft that you're drafting who could approach Kyren Williams level production if things break their way?
I have 4 running backs that I think can get there if everything falls the right way. One is Jaylen Wright, Miami. All he needs is a Raheem Mostert injury or a Devon Achane injury to be fantasy relevant. We've seen 2 Miami running backs be fantasy viable at the same time the last 2 years. Last year was Achane and Mostert. The year before it was Mostert and Wilson. And so we've seen these running backs hit. All it takes is one little nick, one little something to this almost 33-year-old running back. Boom, it's Jaylen Wright, the 4th round running back who has super speed. Kimani Vidal, the LA Chargers. Gus Edwards is already dealing with an injury. J.K. Dobbins is coming back from a massive injury. And Vidal was drafted by this Chargers team. The ambiguity is massive for the Chargers. So sprinkling him in as a possibility.
Can I tell you a fun little exercise?
Sure.
A fun little exercise is that you go to playerprofiler.com and you go to the ADP tab on a player like Jaylen Wright. Okay. Toggle between the high stakes ADP at FFPC and the best ball ADP at Underdog. Okay, so I'm on the Jaylen Wright ADP tab right now. Okay, here's Jaylen Wright. Right, so Jaylen Wright runs a 4.38, super fast, a better fit for that offense than even Devon Achane. Okay, so you've got Jaylen Wright FFPC. He's going at slot 124. Look where he's going on Underdog, 150. Okay, that doesn't make any sense.
Oh,
that doesn't make any sense. Okay, why? There are just certain players where the high stakes community is early on a guy, and that is Jaylen Wright.
Yes.
And so if you're drafting on Underdog, then that's a smash. That's a smash because you say, oh, there's some arbitrage there. So that ADP tab is a great place to go, just to mine for ADP arbitrage opportunities. Give us, give anyone else that could be?
Yeah, we've got Evan Hull.
Yes,
is a very interesting eyebrow raise back. He's competing with Trey Sermon for the RB2 on Indy. We've seen Jonathan Taylor deal with injuries and be a little drama queen. And so Evan Hull, who this is the Kyren Williams pathway. Evan Hull didn't play almost at all his rookie year. He's loved by the coaching staff, and now he has a chance to be the RB2 and is an injury away or a displaced starter away from being a potential starter. And the pathway for Kyren Williams was exactly that, the displaced starter. Coaches love him, missed almost all of his first year due to injury. And so we see that trajectory. Same thing with Kendre Miller. So those two are also candidates, Kendre Miller and Evan Hull. Hull is much cheaper. Kendre Miller, there's been a lot more buzz lately. But I think both of them are candidates to be Kyren Williams.
There were 3 running backs I really liked last year as rookies that didn't fire. Roschon Johnson, Kendre Miller, Evan Hull.
Yes.
And that's where my conviction is. Right, that's where my conviction is because nothing has changed. The Saints didn't add any running backs. The Colts actually shed Zach Moss.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, the Bears added DeAndre Swift, but that to me just made Roschon Johnson a value. That's where my conviction is. Like, conviction matters when things, especially with Roschon Johnson, are breaking against you, right? Or a guy just doesn't produce at all in a particular season. That's where having conviction is a positive trait. Having conviction on a Kyren Williams and just practicing cognitive dissonance and pretending they didn't draft Blake Corum, that's the worst kind of conviction.
The worst.
Right? So congratulations. I mean, we can't do this. We can't do it. We're not going to spend all this. I intentionally, especially for the podcast audience, I am going to be putting most of our Kyren Williams analysis in the outtakes. There's a lot of it there. Because we're as a community, and people hate it when I use that terminology. As an industry, people hate it when I use that terminology. As a group of guys that do similar things in a hobby called fantasy football, okay, we're collectively, the people that I know, because I also, whether it's Eric Beimfor, who agrees with you 100% on Evan Hull, whether, super savvy, high-stakes players like Dan Williamson. I'm talking to these people before the show, before we even do the pre-show, right? The pre-show. Before we turn the cameras on, before we turn the mics on, I'm talking to these guys. And there's just this general embarrassment about certain players like Kyren Williams, where everyone that knows anything agrees this is a joke. And that these are the sucker plays, and that there's why we still have edge. Thank God, right? Thank God, because it's at times I look up and I'm like, man, there's so many efficient moves being made in these draft rooms. I'm like, do we have any edge left? And then thankfully we still have a Kyren Williams, we still have a Brandon Aiyuk that this reminds us that there is still edge to be had. There's been good news, some positive news about Pat Freiermuth. A player who is in his prime, has the day 2 draft capital, has one of the more impressive sort of just all-purpose, super solid tight end skill sets. Like, he's much better than Jake Ferguson. He's much better than Dalton Schultz. You put them in their situations. If Pat Freiermuth were blessed to play football in the state of Texas for a professional team, he would be a smash. He would be killing it in fantasy football. But because he's not on a team in Texas, well, right? He's an afterthought. But here's the thing. You read The Athletic, beat writers saying this guy had the best camp of all. He had a better camp than George Pickens. He even had a better camp than Calvin Austin.
Oh, I love the Pat Freiermuth hype. He's been built up by the beat writers, and look, if he's connected with Russ, we've seen what Russ can do in connecting with, his tight ends. The other part that's not being talked about, Matt, is, or at least not very much, is this ambiguous wide receiver 2 on Pittsburgh. It's clearly the wide receiver 1 is George Pickens, and I love Roman Wilson. However, the beat writers have not been noticing Roman Wilson at all. They have been ignoring him primarily in the chats, in the depth chart, been foregoing him. And this is a recent thing. So this is one of those players where I have like personal conviction, but we also have to respond in the moment, where Pat Freiermuth, tight end 12, his sophomore year, only 2 touchdowns that year. 2 touchdowns, and he was tight end 12. So this is a player that, if he is the number 2 receiving option for Pittsburgh, can easily vault back in, not into just top 12, but we're talking top 7, top 8, is within the range of outcomes for Pat Freiermuth, an injury away to one of the elites, to being a top 5 tight end. The other part is, I got a premonition of this way back. This was many years ago. Freiermuth's rookie year, 2021, was my first year at the FF Expo. And I went down to the Expo, and I was in Canton, Ohio, meeting a lot of people, and I was checking out of the gift shop, and one of the guys, he was like, "Oh, you're a fantasy football guy?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Pat Freiermuth." I'm like, "What about Pat Freiermuth?" He's like, "He's the best tight end in the class." And I'm like, "But Kyle Pitts is also in this class." And he's like, "I saw him play. I saw Pat Freiermuth play, and he's the best tight end in the class by far." Draft capital, second round draft capital.
Who was this that said this?
He was one of the scouts that I had just run into at the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Did Pat Freiermuth do a private workout for this scout, or is he just talking about stuff everyone's seen?
Private workouts. He saw him starting in high school.
Okay, well that's good. Yeah, that's good. He's been following him as he's the regional scout for that particular area, Pennsylvania, whatever it is. I like it.
Okay, but I still have Kyle Pitts above Pat Freiermuth, but a bounce back is very much in play for Pat Freiermuth.
Dude,
and
Pat Freiermuth's a good player.
Second round draft capital, Penn State can churn him out. 25 years old. We're here for Pat Freiermuth.
I'm also here for Calvin Austin. I've been talking about Calvin Austin. I love speed. And you remember a player named Antonio Brown?
Yes.
Remember a player named Emmanuel Sanders?
Yes.
Right. And I knew the brother of a cornerback that played for the Steelers many years ago, and was talking about those guys. They were called Young Money. You take those guys with Mike Wallace, they were called the Young Money Trio. And Emmanuel Sanders, my favorite of those guys. Emmanuel Sanders, by the way, has an incredibly chiseled physique. So, I mean, if Emmanuel Sanders is in the room, my wife probably going to start getting jealous because I'm having a wandering eye, right? So, it's a good-looking man. Bottom line, Pittsburgh is renowned for telling their players that are not necessarily first-round picks, listen, you're going to have to sit a year. This is our culture. Our culture is you have to earn it. And we're old school. And there's a lot of, they don't trade up. Like, they don't do a lot of wheeling and dealing. There's a lot, the way they negotiate contracts. There's a lot about Pittsburgh that we know to be traditional.
Yes.
And one of those things is what it takes to rise up the depth chart. Okay? And if Roman Wilson doesn't fire this year, it's probably because their culture is, hey, if other guys have proven it with hard work, and dedication, they're going to get the first crack. And as long as Calvin Austin doesn't face plant, as long as he's squeezing those passes deep, he's going to keep getting those opportunities. They very much value the meritocracy there, and they're not just going to say, hey, we drafted Roman Wilson in the 3rd round, and so he went ahead of you. You were drafted in the 4th round. We have to prove ourselves right by, slotting in Wilson ahead of you on the depth chart. That's not going to happen in Pittsburgh. They're going to, and Calvin Austin looks like you built a best ball wide receiver in a lab. I feel like you gotta get this guy. And yes, I like Roman Wilson, and yes, I'm going to have some Roman Wilson because Roman Wilson's also really good, and there's huge glaring opportunity there at the wide receiver 2 slot. But new information has arrived, and we are Bayesians, and so now the rostership should tilt more towards Calvin Austin than Roman Wilson.
You want pieces of the big playability. Calvin Austin last year didn't play very much, in terms, there were only a few games where he exceeded 70% of snaps. That was mostly weeks 2, 3, and 4. But during that time, he had one top 27 finish, 2 for 72 on 6 targets, just a big air yard type of guy. And you talk about best ball hitting, like that was a massive, if I recall correctly, it was like a 60-something yard touchdown that he brought down, just broke the defense. And that's what teams are going to not be able to guard him and with 4.3 speed when they know that George Pickens is the first option. Freiermuth is probably the second option. That's going to leave the downfield. Oh, we're going to play a conservative. We're going to play them close to the line of scrimmage. They're not going to spread the field. Calvin Austin's going to spread the field for them. If he is the wide receiver 2, 3 on that team, they need some speed because, Pickens can make the circus catches along the sidelines. He's a dog for sure, but they need another player to add a different dynamic to this offense because it's going to be Najee Harris, Warren, a lot of close to the line of scrimmage guys. Pat Freiermuth, close to the line of scrimmage. Although Freiermuth, one of the quotes out of OTAs was that Freiermuth would take on the Kyle Pitts role for Arthur.
Oh, right.
Smith.
Yeah. Of course. We have to talk about the coaches and the players that used to coach and who's going to play the roles of the players that used to coach. One of my least favorite narratives, but yes, go ahead.
Yeah, and so there's an eyebrow raise of skepticism with that particular quote.
It's not about that. It's not about Kyle Pitts. It's not about some role that's named after some player that a guy used to coach. It's about Pat Freiermuth that he's going to be involved.
Yeah. He's going to be involved, and so Calvin Austin does offer that type of dynamic.
Oh my God! In terms of backdoor stacks, does it get better than Freiermuth, Austin with Fields? Is that a viable backdoor stack on Underdog, not knowing when Fields is going to start?
I think that's an interesting, especially like if you don't have Patrick Mahomes, and you have. Because especially Underdog, the week 17 correlations are really key. You need a couple pieces of the week 17. And so if you're paying up but you miss out on Mahomes, you get your Hollywood Brown, you get your Travis Kelce, you want pieces of that game if you think it's going to get a little wild. And Calvin Austin is a piece, or Pat Freiermuth is a piece of that game near the end of the season. If you're playing for the championship, you want pieces of that game. So I could see a non-Patrick Mahomes team targeting Justin Fields because that game could get a little wild, especially if Pittsburgh's fighting for its playoff life.
To me, it's obvious. The ADP for Justin Fields on Underdog is broken. He's already dropped another round. He's going at the very end of the draft. It doesn't make sense. If it was a small field tournament, then sure. Then you don't draft him. It's a small field tournament, you don't draft. In a big field tournament, in Best Ball Mania? Best Ball Mania, where things have to break exactly your way. There have to be injuries up the depth chart in order for you to make all the money, right? To win it all. Things have to break your way. Like, I don't know, Russell Wilson breaking a pinky in week 1. Just assume that happens, or assume Russell Wilson breaks a toe, whatever it is, some extremity that's not that big of a deal, but he's gonna sit out. Fields exceeds expectations, wins the job the rest of the season. This is still one of the easier things to imagine. Or you had a broken collarbone. There's so many things that could happen to Russell Wilson in week 1, week 2. Suddenly, it's Fields for pretty much the rest of the season. With it's the most affordable, highest upside backdoor stack of multiple skill position players with the quarterback is Fields, Freiermuth, and Calvin Austin. And in a large field tournament with just thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of entries, how do you not have some of that? How?
I mean, that's a real differentiator, because you're talking about less than 10% drafted probably, and then to stack with some of the Pittsburgh players, that is extremely rare. We're talking probably a 1%, less than 1% of finishers, and then there's maybe 2 or 3 that end up going to the finals, possibly. That's what we're talking about.
It doesn't make sense. Just Fields by himself, right? Just Fields by himself. It doesn't. They're playing the Chiefs at home.
Yeah.
What if the weather's good? Right? I mean, come on. Right?
Yeah,
It's
Fields and Lamar Jackson have the same upside based on what they've done the last few years. They can just run the bejeebies out of the ball.
I mean, who's Lamar Jackson playing that week?
Baltimore and Houston.
Exactly. Right? So what's the big difference? Right? What's the big difference? They're both playing on the same day. They're both playing on Christmas. Right? The odds are Fields is going to be the quarterback by Christmas. And the difference is that Fields will actually be at home.
Right.
Right? And the difference is, of all those teams, the Ravens probably have the best defense.
Yeah. And then you could be looking at an improved defense for Houston too.
So, again, explain to me the difference between the Lamar Jackson and the Justin Fields ADP on Underdog. Explain it to me. Explain it to me like I'm 5. Explain it to me.
The positive buzz is that Russell Wilson's going to be the starter, but I agree with you. There is a significant
I don't want to hear it.
Range of outcomes.
It doesn't matter. Whatever you're going to say doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense. Whatever you're going to say doesn't matter.
That's what the wisdom of the crowd is saying, Matt. That's what we need to understand, is that most people believe that it's going to be Russ for the whole season.
Yeah, there's certain broken ADPs out there. One of them is Russell Wilson. What? I mean, God.
I have Russell Wilson at all.
Who would draft him? What are you gaining? Right? I mean, it's like, if Russell Wilson is the quarterback, I don't care. Right? I mean, God, it's just weird, man. It's weird.
Yeah.
All right. The word is, and this is a news item that actually I saw released, Jaleel McLaughlin is a big threat to Javonte Williams. Do you actually believe that?
My belief has gone from 0% to 10%. So right. it was 0 to 15, 10 to 15%. Javonte Williams, he's not shown anything other than he's a plotter.
No, I know that, and he had a devastating knee injury, and he's never going to be the same. That's all understood.
But he can catch passes.
The leap to, well, if it's not Javonte, then it's going to be Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm not
because
there
the beat writer said that Javonte would get cut, and even if he gets cut, Sean Payton has pegged Audric Estime as a first and second down guy. That's what he came out in the draft and said, is that he envisions that Audric Estime is a first and second down running back. So it's going to be Estime if Javonte Williams gets cut anyway, plus McLaughlin. McLaughlin's ceiling is Jaylen Warren. And I'm okay with Jaylen Warren being a RB25 per week. I'm okay with that. I don't hate that. But he's not going to supplant a player who's getting first and second down work, who will get goal line work. McLaughlin's not built to do all of that.
This drives me. Okay, this gives me a migraine headache. Okay. Samaje Perine is still on the roster. And in terms of trust between the tackles, Samaje Perine at 28 years old is not dust. He just happens to be down the official depth chart, and he's not getting the buzz from the beat reporters, because if I was a beat reporter, I mean, think about if you're a beat reporter. Are you going to be writing about Samaje Perine? No.
Nope.
Even though his yards per carry improved last year. He had a career high in receptions with 50 and crushed his career receiving yards total, almost doubled it up.
Yes.
Right? And yet he is not discussed as an option. If they cut Javonte Williams, there is going to be a mix of the scat back in Jaleel McLaughlin and Samaje Perine and Audric Estime. When the Rams turned to Kyren Williams last year, they didn't have a Samaje Perine on the roster. No. They had Ronnie Rivers.
Oh, gross.
Right? Samaje Perine, like it or not, I don't like Samaje. I'm like, oh, Samaje Perine. No. But I know how NFL offenses work and how NFL teams work and coaches work. They're going to give the ball to Samaje Perine.
Right.
What are we talking about? How is it? And then I read news items like, Fantasy Pros, God bless you. Right? They're doing great work. They put out incredible volume of content. Right? But they're talking about Samaje Perine not being a focus of the offense. Says who? What, in mini camp? Of course, the 28-year-old veteran running back is not going to get a lot of work in mini camp. He doesn't need it. He gets the veteran deference, means he gets days off. Right? And he's not going to even, maybe he's not even dressing for practice the days the beat reporter shows up. That doesn't matter. Like, who cares? If they cut Javonte Williams, then the next in line for that role is a Samaje Perine, maybe Estime, though he missed a bunch of minicamp with a knee injury. Or was it a knee injury or something else?
I thought it was, foot or knee injury, something like that. Yeah,
it was a lower leg injury of some kind, foot or knee. And, okay. And it's also one of the worst offenses in the league, guaranteed. Even if Bo Nix exceeds expectations, it's not like their offensive line suddenly got great. It's not like their receivers. So another guy's not even showing up for minicamp. Courtland Sutton. What the hell are we talking about? Please, by all means, continue to chatter about Jaleel McLaughlin. But even if all these guys fade away and all get injured or all show up as dust balls, he's not going to be Kyren Williams, because that's not the Rams, man.
No. If anything, Perine getting released is more likely, and then him landing on like Dallas Cowboys, for instance. Oh,
wouldn't the Cowboys love to get their hands on Samaje Perine?
Yes. Zeke plus Perine is at least more appealing than, I don't know, Rico Dowdle might still have some juice, but like Zeke might maybe go away. They need another veteran there. It's Miles Sanders, Khalil Herbert, possibly Samaje Perine, all candidates to get cut, all candidates to land on the Dallas Cowboys, which would make them all eyebrow raises late round running backs.
Samaje Perine's going to have some weeks. Samaje Perine, I can't wait watching the Red Zone channel and watch Samaje Perine score his second touchdown on a screen pass from the 5-yard line, and no one's there, and he walks right in. And everyone's like, oh my God, why not Jaleel McLaughlin, or why, and it's like, guys, you're surprised? You're surprised that they threw a screen pass to Samaje Perine and no one was paying attention and he walked right in? That's every week in the NFL.
Yes.
God. And then it's also, if you're putting big bets on these sleepers on teams like Denver, you get you get exactly what you pay for. Right? The beauty is, yeah, you could actually draft Pirine in the last round.
He's
for
free.
example, and then he gets traded and you get a boon there. Or anything happens. Either he gets traded or he gets cut. Javonte gets traded, cut, whatever. Doesn't matter. Estimate the slow recovery, whatever it is. Right? We know that you can't ask Jaleel McLaughlin, just like you can't ask Theo Riddick or most of these scat backs to take on a big role. It's not going to happen. They're going to get their 10 touches, and they're going to be explosive and enjoy it. Enjoy those spike weeks.
Yes.
And then, but the spike weeks are going to be different for the Samaje Perine spike weeks. But the idea that there's going to be this like Kyren Williams level player, it's impossible. It's not going to happen. Give me the teams that you think are the best values. All right. So, for example, because Rachaad White is such an incredible value and Chris Godwin, I love the value overall of just drafting people on Tampa.
Yes.
Like I'm drafting, far fewer instances of Broncos, right? I'm drafting a lot of Washington.
Yes.
Right? I'm drafting a lot of Las Vegas. So give me a couple more.
I like the Tennessee Titans. I think all of their players are mispriced and misvalued. They are a team that I have projected as a top 5 pass volume offense. And when it comes to pass volume, you get targets, you get receptions, both for the running back and for the wide receivers. And look, the worst case outcome is that Will Levis is bad. And then the offense is just going to have to throw more because they're having to play catch up. The pathway for Will Levis to take the next step, look out Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 34. Look out DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 37. Look out Tazi Spears and Tony Pollard, those running backs outside the top 24. Chigakonkwo was practically free, but it's the passing volume that is going to be. There was a joke on Twitter that is Brian Callahan going to throw the ball 97% of the time? Like, no, he's not going to throw it that much, but the pace of play is going to be significantly different than the previous regime with Mike Vrabel and a smash mouth Derrick Henry offense. They're going to get more plays in. They're going to get more passes in. And the ball is going to go to Hopkins and Ridley. And that's, we know their consolidated target share is going to be in the 55+%. So to get massive values on those players, Will Levis led all of the NFL in air yards per attempt last year. Imagine he gets improved coaching. Imagine like a coach who knows how to get his quarterback to throw the ball down the field. Not saying he's necessarily Joe Burrow, like let's not get carried away, but the efficiency doesn't need to be there for Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans to still give you fantasy goodness among the Titans.
So if I'm in Best Ball Mania, again, big field tournament, right? My attitude is I'm probably not drafting a third quarterback because I'm assuming my 2 quarterbacks hit. Is that fair?
I've been much more in favor of 3 quarterback builds this year.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
So my general idea is, hey, I can take one quarterback that has incredible upside, whatever, whoever it is, right? Let's say it's Josh Allen, right? We know it. And then just assume that Justin Fields is a hit. Just assume Will Levis is a hit. Take the high upside guy, get one stable guy that we know, and I still consider Joe Burrow stable.
Yes.
Right? Joe Burrow has incredible weapons. Joe Burrow's Joe Burrow, dude. Joe Burrow's just had some injuries. Okay, big deal.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
They had to rebuild the offensive line. There's been a whole bunch of bad weather games. It's just been a challenge, right? It's a new season. It's a new day for Joe Burrow. Stable situation, right? Love him, right? So I take a stable guy with ridiculous weapons or rushing ability, and then I take a guy that's a high volatility guy.
Sure.
Right. And that's my, and I assume that they're going to hit, and that's my attitude. You're more in favor of 3 quarterback builds. Why is that?
I think for a few reasons. One is since we've seen games increase from 16 to 17, quarterback injuries have skyrocketed. And usually the backup is very bad. Usually the backup is very, very bad. And that's going to doom your team. Your team will go straight to zero if you don't have quarterback. So you want to make yourself stay alive for the playoffs to start. Second is when it comes to individual positional scoring in half-point PPR formats, the quarterback slot, the top 5 quarterback slot, scores more points than a top 5 running back or a top 5 wide receiver, a top 5 tight end. And so if you hit big, the difference between you getting like 25 fantasy points, you could get that, but you could also have access to 35 fantasy points for your massive quarterbacks. I've been going with elite quarterback and 3 quarterback builds because I want to make sure that I want to eliminate as many dead teams as possible. I want to increase the amount of stacking that I have. It gives me more possibility of exposure to games, and the individual quarterback can score more fantasy points than we can haggle over the tight end, like getting 3 tight ends, but haggling over whether this tight end gets me 11 points or 12 points, that's not as distinguishable as a quarterback that can get you the difference between 22 points and 30 points. That's the significant scale. The standard deviation for these quarterbacks is much larger.
Yes.
And so
the access to weak winning, truly difference-making upside is there for quarterbacks like it is for no other position.
Correct. Which is why I want to take, number 1, more shots on it. 2, I want to keep more teams alive, because if you are drawing dead at quarterback, your team is drawing dead completely. And 3 is I want access to these stacks. So I will not select typically 2 quarterbacks in the same week 17 game, because I want to have as many options as possible as I'm going through and making those stacking decisions. I want to have more options or opportunities. I don't want to have as many quote unquote naked flex players as I'm going through. Or if I can backdoor stack, there are some backdoor stack type players that I'm in favor of as well.
Would you backdoor stack Mahomes and Fields if Fields was your 3rd quarterback? You would.
Typically no, because I would backdoor correlate like Kansas City and then take Justin Fields, because let's say that someone took Mahomes but I needed positionally to draft wide receiver, and so I took a Hollywood Brown or I took a Rashee Rice, then come back later on with a Justin Fields to correlate, saying that I'm getting part of this game that could explode, but I don't have the Mahomes part, which might be the limiting factor for some of the Mahomes teams. I'm competing against Mahomes teams without Mahomes in that same environment. So
yeah, my logic for that is that you have so many players are going to be your bench players that week anyway. If one of them happens to be the other quarterback in that game that scored a bit less, that's not the worst thing in the world. But I do agree, you need, you shouldn't be in. I was trying to think of the one case where you might want to have, or it might be viable to have 2 quarterbacks with the same week 17 game matching up against each other. I will say, for the casual fantasy gamer, this is the aspect of best ball that they find frustrating.
Yes.
That you're in a draft room and you don't have the week 17 schedule committed to memory, and you haven't read all there is to read on strategy, and you look like a donkey by accident drafting 2 quarterbacks that are facing off against each other in week 17. That is something that, is a level of sophistication, because it's just this particularly super. I mean, 17 is a prime number. 17 is such an arbitrary fucking number, right? It is just so arbitrary. The number 17, generally speaking, is fucking arbitrary, right? So that, of all the data that I need to process, I need to memorize week 17. Again,
Yes.
if we were talking to aliens about playing fantasy football, they would find that really weird, right? Really, really weird. And just like, because it's the same when you talk to a normal person who's a casual gamer and you try to explain best ball. And you're like, yeah, you really can't have the same two quarterbacks in the same game in week 17. They're going to be like, wait, what? What is it? I have to, excuse me? Right? And you're like, no, here's why. Because there's a correlation. And maybe Mahomes and Fields, but that'd be the only scenario. It's like, whoa, right? It's like, I don't know.
Right.
How you sell. It's just, there are things about best ball that I love, and there are things that I find a little more challenge. Like I think that's very interesting, but some of the interesting elements of it I find sometimes to be a little bit challenging to pitch to more casual gamers. That just happens to be the one that sticks out to me. And so I was like trying to think of, well, could there be a scenario where that wouldn't be the worst thing ever? And then you're like, not really. I would never do that. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I wouldn't either. Damn it.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. So I actually have 10 more questions for you. Okay, 10 more questions for Bradley Stalder coming up after this. This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly, especially now. It's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off. 10 burning questions. 10 burning questions from a man, Bradley Stalder. First in the shoot. What is the most common roster build for your 2024 best ball teams?
I have 3 most common builds. The first one is 28% of my teams are 3-5-8-2.
3 quarterbacks.
3 quarterbacks.
5 running backs.
Yes.
8 receivers. 2 tight ends.
Yes. 3-5-8-2.
What do you like about that build?
I like taking the shots on the amount of wide receivers. That's 8 is about the right number. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 9, but I think 8 is about the right middle number. It also harps on what we talked about earlier with taking shots on 3 quarterbacks, 3 starting quarterbacks. We know who probably 30 of the 32 starting quarterbacks are right now. Like, there's not a lot of left for the imagination. Maybe we don't know who Vegas is, maybe we don't know who Pittsburgh is, maybe, but really we know almost all of the starting quarterbacks for week 1. And so there's some confidence that we can have in drafting those. And so I'm a big fan of taking 3 quarterbacks, and that's why I'm putting that is my most common roster build.
What's your second most common?
3-5-7-3.
So really it revolves around 3 quarterbacks, as you mentioned earlier. You're really all in on 3 quarterbacks. You've explained why.
Yes.
Is the third most popular one where you go, say, 3-4-7-4?
It's 2-5-8-3 is
Okay, so
also
you are
20%.
okay. So you're not as okay. You do have plenty of 2 quarterback builds.
About
More- you have more-
55% are 3 quarterbacks.
So about 55% 3 quarterback, which would be
45% is two quarterbacks. It's only 2 or 3 quarterbacks.
Of course,
That's what we're dealing with.
What's your percentage of 4 tight ends?
I'm at 1% right now.
Okay, but I've heard that's a popular. Some people love that build.
So it will be more popular for me when we get closer to August, September.
Okay.
Because we lack I talked about we have clarity for the quarterback position right now. 30 of 32 teams have pretty firm starters for week 1. Maybe Minnesota. There's been chatter about Darnold getting started. I don't have too much worry about McCarthy starting, but that's just a player take. However, we have a lot of ambiguity when it comes to those late round tight ends. Like the tight end pretty much 28 and following, man, we don't know who's going to be the starter at the Rams. Is it going to be Parkinson? Is it going to be someone else? Is it going to be Jatavion Sanders week 1 or even halfway through the season? Like, we like some things about Jatavion Sanders, but there were some things that were red flags. He didn't get day 2 draft capital. There were some flags on his profile. Is it Greg Dulcich in Denver? We don't know. So I want more
How much
information.
juice does Zach Ertz have left?
Right. Ben Sinnott. The reality is, Matt, when it comes to tight ends, we don't have the information. And so I'd rather wait much later into the season to get that information. Who's going to be the Chargers starter? Is it Hayden Hurst? Is it Donald Parham? Like, is it?
That's Hayden Hurst. It's not.
Is
Parham.
it Will
Parham's
Disley?
Parham does not have the auxiliary skill set to be
Right.
an every down tight end. He's like a guy that can run routes. It's a shame though, because if he had a better bend. And he had the ability to block because he just didn't get the training, right? He's a basketball player, played from a small school. Those guys, it's a steep learning curve, and oftentimes they never quite get it. And so he's going to be a situational tight end only, which is going to by default mean it's going to be Hayden Hurst. There's not a lot of target competition there, kind of like Hayden Hurst.
Well, the issue with Hayden Hurst is he had post-concussion syndrome, which meant that he couldn't remember parts of his life after that concussion. He almost retired this past off season because of the issues with the concussions out of Carolina. So there's a major, major injury red flag with Hayden Hurst. Like, is it Will Disley? You could talk.
It will be. Yeah, that's the answer.
Right.
That's
but
the thing.
there's
You got to know that Harbaugh. What is he going to want? He's going to want a Disley in there. So it's going to be So anyway. Understand
long story
what you're saying.
short is these.
Well, we'll talk about. I'm sure, not sure, maybe a receiver on the Chargers who benefits from all of this. We'll get into that later. But 4 tight ends, not yet. But 4 tight ends in mid-August, absolutely.
Yeah, we could be looking at that once we get clarity on like the Giants. Is it Bellinger? Is it Theo Johnson?
Once we have more of these tight ends locked in, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of push the button and load up in those later rounds. Right now, it's just too risky. It's not worth it. The juice is not worth the squeeze, man. It's not worth the squeeze. And I don't think that's a cliche. I think not enough people use that. The juice is not worth the squeeze. I'm not going to cliche alert myself because I don't think it's reached cliche level so ubiquity yet. So look at the first round. Right, we've been talking to a lot of fringe players, a lot of strategy talk. Let's just quickly make sure that we address the first round, which is fun. First round is really good players, in case you haven't heard. I don't think we've talked about any first round picks other than like, okay, you want baseline Bijan and Breece Hall. That's the only commentary we've had so far about first round guys. And that one brief moment where Kyren Williams was being drafted at slot 11 and 12 was one of the jokiest, dumbest ADPs I've ever seen. Pre-draft, post-draft, doesn't matter. It was the height of fantasy stupidity.
Right.
Now, who are you drafting the most of in the first round?
I have 15% exposure to Tyreek Hill in the first round.
Okay. Who are you drafting the least of?
Justin Jefferson.
I had this take a month ago, and I was chased off it because he has been so good and he's historic and he's Jerry Rice.
Yeah, my concern is that the Minnesota Vikings will start Sam Darnold for a couple games, and that's going to be an absolute disaster. And team morale is just going to... because we know Darnold isn't good at all. Right. He's bad at football. Like, he's just bad at football. Just the decision
he was drafted before in the draft. He has higher draft capital than JJ McCarthy.
McCarthy is one of those players that has a lot of, like, you talk about his physical skill set. You talk about what he was able to do from an efficiency metric point of view at the University of Michigan. He is a player that we can like I have a good amount of him because of his value. He's being drafted so late, and the pass volume will be there. But if he's not getting first team reps, if he's not getting the starter stuff, it's going to take a long time for him to get used to. He's going to spend the first 7 weeks of him starting as his preseason if he's not getting first team reps now. And that's disastrous when you're facing the Packers and the Lions, right? And a rejuvenated Bears team. Bears have a really good defense. Like, they have one of the best defenses in the NFL.
After having the worst 2 years ago.
Right. And so you've got, and the Packers have upgraded significantly. The Lions have addressed significant needs on their defense.
NFC so you've got North. Woo, baby.
So the reality is like we could be looking at JJ McCarthy being like an interesting week 17 click, but Justin Jefferson teams, the pathway for him to let them down is very, it's very feasible. And so I'll have my shares of Justin Jefferson. I'll have a little bit sprinkled. It's going to be pretty flat.
Who should have a higher ADP, Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I think Amon-Ra this year.
Okay. Who should be on your do not draft list? The players that you should scratch off because you believe that it's impossible for this player to beat me, so I can feel free to have 0% rostership on those players, and you're not allowed to say Kyren Williams. You can't say Kyren Williams because we all know that no one in this audience has any Kyren Williams, has drafted him yet. I don't think anyone's pushed the button yet. No one will. He would have to be, basically, I think at this point, Kyren Williams would have to go in the double-digit rounds for anyone to draft him that listens to this show. And I think it's a beautiful thing. We've saved you all. Literally, if you just look at Underdog entry fees, DraftKings entry fees, FFPC entry fees, we've saved people if you look at the audience, the size of this audience, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars we've saved them on Kyren Williams' advice alone. Yes. Give us other players you should just never draft.
Yeah. Number one is Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy's price, he needs to be about 4 rounds later for me to be clicking him.
For a rookie receiver to beat you, do you realize what they have to beat you and how few rookie receivers have ever been in a position to beat people in season-long fantasy? It's such a rare thing to be beaten by a rookie receiver.
Yes. So, like, from a general perspective, from a looking overarching view, that's the perspective of Xavier Worthy. Then you look at, okay, these are these specific projections for Xavier Worthy. How many games is he going to play? Probably 15, 16 games. But he is competing against a Hollywood Brown who has historically always commanded between 22 and 28% of targets. So somewhere in that range. And then there's ambiguity about the Rashee Rice situation right now. But we're talking about where is the money made? The money is being made in weeks 15, 16, 17. Who's going to be available? Probably Rashee Rice. Even if he gets a 4 or 6 game suspension for his shenanigans this past offseason, the reality is he's most likely going to be available for those playoff weeks. And so you're competing against a player who proved that he was very efficient. Rashee Rice's PFF receiving grade was very strong. His yards per route run was very strong. And so you're competing against two wide receivers who have 20+% target shares, plus your Travis Kelce. And then the last part is the history of not just rookie wide receivers, but rookie wide receivers on Kansas City. We look back on the last couple wide receivers. It took Rashee Rice half of a season, more than half the season, to start getting starter snaps. Just starter snaps. And then we look back the year before, Sky Moore, it took him. Sky Moore didn't even get starter snaps his first year. So our concern is that the rookie wide receivers have a strong learning curve in the Kansas City offense. In general, first-round wide receivers, late first-round wide receivers take a while to hit. And then the specific team context for how the target shares are being distributed. Xavier Worthy, it's hard to be clicking him at, where is he going now?
Okay, so how it works in real football, tell us in a minute, but how it works in real football is that they're going to draw up a bunch of very specific packages for Xavier Worthy.
Yes.
And that's how he's going to get in the game in the first 8 weeks of the season. He's going to come in and he's going to be a focal point when he gets in there. But you're not going to be happy with the snap share, man.
Nope. Xavier Worthy right now is ADP 62. 62. Now, the other part of this, Matt, is who are you going to be drafting in that spot? We talked about the running backs that are going in this area, the Rashad Whites, the Joe Mixons of the world, right?
Yeah, you really need to be focused on the Kenneth Walkers and those players in those spots. And there's tight ends that are going there. There's quarterbacks.
Kyle Pitts, yes.
Yeah, there's just other positions where that's really not. That's almost that's kind of a wide receiver dead zone in best ball.
Yes.
It really is a wide receiver dead zone where, I like Christian Kirk. There's definitely players I like in the middle rounds. There's no doubt. But mostly I'm trying to get my super premium Amon-Ra St. Browns, and then I'm trying to hit on all the Calvin Austins late. That's what, and we'll talk a little bit more about late round wide receivers in a minute, but it makes for like a little wide receiver dead zone there, which is interesting.
Yes.
Anyone else that we need to put on the do not draft list?
He's right next to him and in a couple spots above. This hurts me as a Packers fan, Matt. It hurts me as a Packers fan, but it's Jayden Reed. I love Jayden Reed as a prospect. I love Jayden Reed with his touchdowns, his dynamism. But for him to pay off, Jayden Reed is getting drafted ahead of Xavier Worthy. He's getting drafted 57th overall. You think Jayden Reed is going to be the 57th most valuable fantasy football asset?
That could happen very easily.
What scares me, though, is how he was being used with the Packers in two tight end sets. And the Packers want to use two tight end sets with Kraft and Musgrave. Both of them have shown that they're pretty similar, like Musgrave over Kraft, I think is the take, but they're similar enough. They were second and third round draft capital tight ends who both have earned their way onto the field. Jayden Reed is getting pumped through touchdowns from last year. He had 8-10 touchdowns. He's not going to be able to replicate all of that with the evolution of Dontavion Wicks, with hopefully a healthy Christian Watson. The pathway for failure for Jayden Reed, there are so many pathways for failure, and there's only one pathway for success, and that's for multiple injuries to the other pass catchers on this offense for him to pay off this spot. Like if he was getting discounted, I want discount Jayden Reed, but he's not a player who's going to beat you without all of those injuries happening.
Well, the rushing is nice because that's what fueled. He had 10 touchdowns. That was a 13.3% touchdown rate for a wide receiver. And you see that when you look at the fantasy points per route run, he was top 10. Look at the yards per route run, he was outside the top 25 because he's scoring touchdowns in other ways, right? So
right.
I love Jayden Reed. I think that he is a receiver at that ADP that could be just phenomenal. That could be Stephon Diggs. And I think he can beat you. And I think putting him on a do not draft list is a mistake for that reason. It's a super ambiguous wide receiver core. Things could consolidate and shake out in undefined ways right now. And you need to have a little bit of him just in case he's the guy. And he is Stephon Diggs. But I understand being underweight on him just because as a rule of thumb, taking the guys with the 10+% touchdown rates from the previous year, like let's say Christian Watson last year, it was like, well, why not Christian Watson? Like touchdown rate, it's unsustainable. Right. So if the touchdowns were unsustainable the previous year, if you want to fade a guy based on that stat alone, by all means, he's not going in a round like third, fourth round where you're like, okay, he's maxed himself out. Like he could end up paying off as the true alpha in this passing game. He has that in him, in his talent profile for sure, especially knowing that Romeo Doubs is a dud. Christian Watson is a wild card. So there are things that could shake out his way. So I'm not with you that he's a do not draft guy. My favorite guy to draft on the Packers is Luke Musgrave. I think that Tucker Kraft has had some injuries that have gone underreported. We're talking about the ankle injury where he has to have the tightrope procedure done. And then he has a pectoral injury. He's torn the pectoral off the bone, all these things. Second-year guy coming into the league, as the number 2 behind a guy who is just more of a premium stud. That's all bad, man. That's all missing practice time, missing workout time. That stuff for a second-year player is one of the least appreciated aspects that, again, fuels my love for Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, and Musgrave has been one of the later tight end targets. I mean, he is going to be on the field as long as he's healthy, at least in 1 tight end sets, and also they're on 2 tight end sets. So Musgrave,
you love ambiguous passing games. Don't forget about the tight end, dude.
Yes.
Yeah, especially a tight end like Luke Musgrave. It's like he looks like George Kittle out there. Anyone watch this guy? You ever seen his metrics on Player Profiler? Speed score off the charts. Okay. I love backdoor stacks. We talked earlier about the fringiest of backdoor stacks, the old Calvin Austin, Justin Fields banana in the tailpipe. You gotta love the Austin Fields banana in the tailpipe, which is fine. I'll fall for it. I'm gonna fall for it. There's other ones I like. Godwin Mayfield's been talked about on this show. Daniel Jones, Wan'Dale Robinson. These are the little micro stacks. You're a draft 3 quarterbacks guy. So if you're a draft 3 quarterbacks guy, one of those stacks almost always is going to be a backdoor.
Yes. I like 3 that are coming up. The Jalen Polk, Pop Douglas with Drake May.
Okay, well that's easy.
So one
that's
of those.
That's Drake May is CJ Stroud moving on.
Right. The next is, your DK Metcalf and Geno Smith. Geno Smith is extremely undervalued.
Well, I wouldn't call that a backdoor stack because DK Metcalf's going too high for that. Maybe
you think
Lockett.
So?
Would you go Lockett, Geno Smith?
Yeah, Lockett's.
Would you go Jackson Smith and Jigba, Geno Smith?
JSN, Geno Smith, yeah.
Okay, so let's look at the Geno. Okay, so Jackson Smith and Jigba is going at slot 77. I think that is fair because Geno's going so late. I think JSN Geno is a legit backdoor stack.
So I like that. And then you mentioned Wan'Dale Daniel Jones. I'm very high on Daniel Jones. The last time that we saw Daniel Jones healthy, he was a top 12 quarterback in fantasy points per game. I think it was top 10 even. But he offers a lot with the rushing. He is not just a mobile quarterback. He is a rushing quarterback. And that's the difference between him coming back from the ACL injury and like Joe Burrow coming back from an ACL injury. Daniel Jones is going to be more like Kyler coming back from his ACL injury. And Kyler showed almost no slowdown in terms of rushing. And we're here for a top 12, top 10 quarterback from the rushing.
I'm going to do a manual one right now, but we should do a new sound effect called a hot take alert. I love that. I really do. I love that.
Hot take alert.
That's it. That's the
There we
sound
go.
effect.
We love it.
We love it.
Yeah, Wan'Dell's going so late, Matt. Darren Waller retired. What are we doing?
My hot take alert is Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors finish with the same number of receptions.
So you hate Malik Neighbors or love Wan'Dale Robinson?
Love Wan'Dale Robinson. It doesn't matter. Malik Neighbors will have twice as many yards and touchdowns.
True.
It's fine. It's totally fine. They both finished with 78 catches.
I love it.
Yeah, Neighbors blows him out of the water with fantasy points, but they do technically have the same number of receptions.
Yeah, he's clearly the number 2 receiving option in that offense.
It's easy. My case for Wan'Dale, you probably heard the last My Dimension show, is that the redundancy is with the field stretchers, with Hyatt and Slayton.
Yes.
I mean, the center of the field is Wan'Dale territory. I think Neighbors and he are going to be running routes against you. I think that's going to be great. I love that idea. What I would do is I would put Hyatt on the bench because Hyatt stinks. So I would put Slayton out wide at X. Let him
That's a late wide receiver.
Yeah, run air against the best corner, try to get him matched up against the alpha corner, and then have Neighbors and Wan'Dale tucked inside on the right-hand side at Y and Z and play off each other. That would be sick.
We're here for that.
So I would have Neighbors on double moves, right? And then Wan'Dale can rub off and try to free him up for the double move and then just curl back inside. That's unstoppable to me.
Oh, it's so easy. So easy path, such an easy pathway for Wan'Dale to pay off. His ADP is what, in the 150s?
Yeah, I love how we have people in the chat that are like all disagreeing on Wan'Dale. Wan'Dale very, very,
Wan'Dale's
very
170s.
polarizing. Matt. Also, Wan'Dale's going to get like 20 carries. You talk about 10 touchdowns from Jayden Reed. There's going to be rushing touchdowns available for Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson was a rushing quarterback at Kentucky,
who then converted to wide receiver and crushed at wide receiver.
Yeah, he's a great football player. He's what I like drafting great football players. Now I will give you in the chat. I will give you Josh Palmer. Derek Lincoln says Josh Palmer. He's more right about Josh Palmer than he is about Wan'Dale Robinson. However, Josh Palmer is not a great football player. He's just a guy that's there in the best possible situation. Do you agree Josh Palmer should be on this list?
Josh Palmer's a player, I mean, if it's not going to be Ladd McConkey, it's going to be Josh Palmer. He has the rapport. He's earned targets in the past. He's put up the clunkiest boom weeks we've ever seen. Like, it's probably like 7 for 100 on 18 targets. Josh Palmer, he's not going to.
I think Herbert Palmer is a backdoor stack.
Both are, I think, a little undervalued in terms of what they can bring you in terms of a floor. Like, Josh Palmer is not going to bring you ceiling games. Herbert in this our Jim Harbaugh offense, not giving you many top 5 weeks in terms of boom explosion games. But is he going to give you a nice floor? Is he always going to be quarterback 14 to 18 and never bust for you? Sure, fine, okay.
Right. And then you could also stack up those Patriots receivers.
Yes.
Right? Because that's week 17, Chargers, Patriots. That could be a sneaky little shootout. If the weather cooperates in Foxborough that week, man, I wish it was in LA. That would have been, that'd have been nice. But that could because we know if it's the NFL and it's a regular season, every Chargers defender is going to get hurt. Right? Half their offensive line and all the receivers, except Palmer. We know that's going to happen. So that's interesting. That is, no one is trying to stack that game. No one. No one. But that is the backdoor stack game. Is you
the
get those
correlation
guys
you
with
want.
Pop Douglas, Josh Palmer, Pop Douglas. Cool.
The unsexiest stacks and correlation.
Hunter
but
Henry.
They'll get it done.
Can't agree. Okay, we can't agree on any kind of Chargers tight end. That's okay. Hunter Henry.
There
Cool.
you go. Pivot to
Fine.
Hunter Henry.
Hunter Henry. You don't want to draft Hayden Hurst because he can't remember his grandmother's name. Okay, no problem. Right? I give you Hunter Henry. So Hunter or Hayden, right? God, I had a joke there that I did not say. There was a joke there in an election year, which I could have gone with. I would have gone with earlier, but I am editing myself. I had a joke there. No, I'm not doing it. But maybe in the outtakes, if you listen to the podcast, maybe we'll reveal it. Okay. Now, two more late round wide receivers for best ball.
Sure. Luke McCaffrey.
Speaking of, right?
Washington. Yes. Yeah. Massive value. Who's going to be the wide receiver 2? I mean, if we so there's a pathway, right? It's Terry McLaurin on the outside and Jahan Dotson. McCaffrey fits in there as the wide receiver 3. But let's say you don't like Jahan Dotson. Let's say you're like,
well,
no,
who do you have more of?
Who
do you have more rostership wise? Do you have more McCaffrey or more Dotson?
Oh, McCaffrey by far.
Really?
Because of the value, because he's so cheap.
Well, Dotson could be this year's Nico Collins.
Which is fine. But his price, Dotson is being drafted 134th overall, and McCaffrey is being drafted 182nd overall. So we're talking 4 or 5 rounds differential.
That's about right. One guy's a first round pick, one guy's a third round pick. You want this year's Nico Collins, I'm telling you.
I drafted a lot of Dotson last year. I'm feeling kind of hurt, but I'm still drafting some Dotson.
Even the great Bradley Stalder is susceptible to fantasy PTSD. It can happen to anybody.
I am.
It can happen to anybody where no one is 100% rational. Okay, give us one more guy. One more guy. I'm going to override you and say it's Dotson. Go ahead. One more guy.
It's fine. I'm here for Dotson, but I chose these players that were ADP 150.
No, I understand. It's not actually Dotson because he doesn't even qualify as being drafted past ADP 150. Okay.
But I do like. I have been drafting some Dotson. I've been drafting more
personally, I've yet to see Terry McLaurin ever miss a game.
It's true.
And I don't generally love third receivers with mobile quarterbacks. So there's a couple reasons why I haven't been Mr. Late Round McCaffrey. So that's where, I'm not going to agree with you on everything. I'm not going to agree with you to not draft Jayden Reed. I'm not going to agree with you to pile into Luke McCaffrey. Give us one more late round guy, and I hope to God we agree on this one.
It's okay, Matt. You won the Rashad White deal last year. I was out on White. You won.
Wait, you don't need to bring that up, dude. You didn't need to bring that up. You realize how few people remember that? You don't need
but
to do
you remember
that.
it, and I remember it.
You don't need to out yourself on Rashad White. Don't do that. Don't do that.
It's okay. I'm back in this year. I'm back in.
That's a radio hack, man. They don't remember. Don't remind them.
So you already took Wan'Dale Robinson. You already took him from my list. So I'm pivoting to another day 2 rookie wide receiver, and that's Malachi Corley. Malachi Corley has a pathway to be, again, the wide receiver 2. Mike Williams is coming off a devastating knee injury. He may not be ready to start the season. We'll see. And even if he does, okay, Matt, over under 10.5 games Mike Williams plays.
Thank you for bringing up Malachi Corley as another guy that I'm not drafting much of. But I want to share with you multiple people in the chat, including Jared Dean. That's a Roto Underworld investor, Jared Dean, bringing up a guy that I would, we does Darnell Mooney count? He's the other guy in the chat. I don't think so. I think he's right on the breaking point. He's right there on the threshold.
Mooney's at 149.
So I knew it. I said it was. Did I not? Did I not? ADP Savant. Add a new moniker to me. Add a new moniker for Twitter and X. ADP Savant. I actually had ADP Whisperer before. Now we're going to change it to ADP Savant.
There you go.
Michael Wilson. Why not Michael Wilson? Are you scared of Greg Dortch?
No, I'm not scared of Greg Dortch. I do like sprinkling in Greg Dortch, but Michael Wilson is a player that
when upside there.
He had a 17% target share last year when Hollywood Brown was out, which is fine. It's okay. I don't mind it. And he would be the third receiving option on the team for Arizona, filing in behind McBride and Marvin Harrison. He's okay. I don't mind him. I don't hate him as a late round. But
listen, I'm just looking at elite offenses. That's going to be one of the best offenses. And wide receiver 2 chair wide open. That's all I'm looking for. And now I get a guy who's 6'1", 215 with an all-purpose skill set. He can play every position. I like it. Technically sound, good hands, everything. I like that. Imagine Josh Palmer, but better in every way.
We're okay with that.
That's actually that's a compliment.
I've been taking some Michael. Yeah, I've been taking some.
That's a compliment. All right. Give me your favorite late round tight end.
Favorite late round. So after tight end 20?
Whatever arbitrary threshold you want to use.
We did
wide receiver 150. Use whatever arbitrary designation you want.
Sure. I like Tyler Conklin.
All right.
I'm here for the Conk Daddy.
Everybody says Tyler Conklin on this show.
God,
yeah, but here's the problem.
I have been the original Tyler Conklin.
No, I think that's a much better pick than Malachi Corley. And I just want to make sure people understand this. We don't all listen to all shows on the Underworld Network. We can't. We just don't have enough time in the day. A lot of what we do is looking at the right data points and coming to similar conclusions independently. This isn't like we get together in meetings and we all like talk each other into. That's not what happens with a guy like Tyler Conklin. It's just smart, good, like some of the best analysts all happen to find the same predictive data points, and boom, Tyler Conklin. Give us one more guy.
All right. I like Noah Fant.
Yes, that's the other guy everybody loves. God damn it. I'm looking for everybody loves. Okay, we've talked about Hunter Henry. We've talked about Noah Fant. I mean, we just had a bold prediction from Dan Williamson on Noah Fant. And everybody loves Tyler Conklin. Everybody's favorite tight end at Player Profiler is Tyler Conklin. I love Luke Musgrave. You give us one. I know what I'm digging deep, and I'm asking a lot of you, Bradley. Digging deep.
It's fine.
I'm asking a lot of you. I need one more. Give me one more.
Jelani Woods.
Okay, good. There it is. That's it.
Jelani Woods.
Breakout alert. Jelani Woods. Why not? Why not Jelani Woods? You like athletes at tight end? That's predictive.
We love them.
It's more predictive for tight ends than any other position.
People forget he was just injured last year. There wasn't bad play.
Yeah. He's going to be on the field. He's going to be on the field more than Adonai Mitchell.
Probably.
100%. I love that. God, see, I just wanted to get together with you on this. Thank you.
Yes.
Give us your top truther player, the guy you don't drop in Dynasty under any circumstances, though he stinks or doesn't do anything ever.
Oh, Puka Nacua. He's my top truther guy, for sure.
What?
Yeah. I have 45% in Dynasty of Puka Nacua, Matt.
No, okay, well, that's good. I mean, honestly, good for you. I'm very happy for you. You were very smart last year to go Puka Nacua. Helps make up for fading Rashad White, by the way.
Look, I'll take the L on
So
Rashad
there's a
White.
balance to the universe. I appreciate that
Yes.
very much. You reminding us of that. That doesn't help anybody. Okay. No one's looking at Puka Nacua going, man, I should drop him, but I can't. I believe. No one's doing that.
Well, good, but don't trade him away either. Maybe that's the pivot. Is he's not a one-season wonder. Matthew Stafford
You're not
is a
going to
kingmaker.
save this answer. Okay, you answered that is outside the bounds of relevancy for the truther category. Okay. Under no circumstances would anyone ever classify Puka Nacua as a truther, and you can't spin it. I'm trying to filibuster now so that you can have time to think of someone else who is super fringy, like Michael Wilson, that you believe in and that you will continue to believe in, even though he hasn't done a goddamn thing.
Oh man,
You know how this question works. This is not your first time on the show.
Yeah, well, the last time it didn't go so well either, Matt. So,
What was your last truther? What was your truther last time?
I'm pretty sure it was Calvin Ridley was the truther last time.
That's not he wasn't a truther at the time, nor did he exceed expectations. You should have traded Calvin Ridley when you could. So that was a double fail on Calvin Ridley. I've said Jahan Dotson. We've posted up a bunch of good truthers that on this show. We're just asking for one more.
Yeah. Andre Yoshiva.
Yes, thank you. That's one of the best truthers we've ever had. You went from the worst truther nomination I've ever heard to one of the best.
Yoshiva has the pathway to be the wide receiver 2 next year for Cincinnati, and T. Higgins signed his 1-year contract just now. Fine. But look, you can love Jermaine Burton, but he's got some flags. He's got some red flags in his profile. And Yoshiva could be the pathway to wide receiver 2 in a Joe Burrow offense. So, yeah, I have a lot of Yoshiva in Dynasty.
Bingo, bingo, bongo. Excellent job. No, that's the wrong one. I almost did.
That was the Puka Nacua one.
No. You know what? This is the second time that's fucking happened to me because I have it saved as The Price is Right, but it's The Price is Right loser game show, and then in my little console, the label cuts it off. So then I see Price is Right, and so I'm like, oh, Price is Right, and I click it because I'm doing a million things, and then I get the wrong one. This was what I was looking for. See that? Oh well. We'll get it right. Again, as with everything, we get it right. We'll have it all cleaned up in the podcast, but the live YouTube audience gets to see all the mistakes that we make. It's always a pleasure. Give us a bold prediction. Get you out of here.
Chris Olave becomes the top 5 wide receiver we've all wanted him to be in 2024.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.